Mr. Harper, your time is up. We will hold Stephen Harper to account, and we will oppose his government in Parliament.
A challenge for the Prime Minister, but would it mean a trip to the polls?
Our preference remains fighting for the unemployed rather than fighting for a second election.
On News and Review today, Parliament and the election question. Hello, I'm Carla Robinson. For a while this fall, it looked as if Canadians would be heading for the polls for the second time in less than a year. All three opposition parties seemed determined to defeat the country's minority Conservative government, and there seemed to be nothing Prime Minister Stephen Harper could do about it. His party has more seats than any other, but it depends on the support of at least one opposition party to stay in power. And for most of this year, that party had been the Liberal Party, with Jack Layton's NDP and Gilles Doucet's Bloc Québécois voting against the government. But as the summer began, with his party ahead in the polls, the new Liberal leader, Michael Ignatieff, signaled that could be about to change.
We have to fix it, and we have to fix it now.
Ignatieff demanded improvements to Canada's employment insurance system, and he warned that if he didn't get those changes, he might bring down the government.
If the government will work with me, we can get it done. If they won't, then we'll have to have an election.
The Harper government managed to avoid a summer election by agreeing to set up a panel to study changes to the EI system. But when the politicians came back to Ottawa after a summer break, Ignatieff was no longer in any mood to compromise. As the CBC's Leslie McKinnon reports, he announced that the Liberals would no longer support the government.
Mr. Harper, your time is up. We will hold Stephen Harper to account, and we will oppose his government in Parliament.
Ignatieff listed the government's failings that he says are no longer tolerable: incompetency in battling the recession, not defending health care against American attacks, not protecting Canadians abroad, some of whom he named.
Swad Mohammed, Omar Khadr, Maktal, Bahari, Mohammed, Abdul Razik. A Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian.
Suddenly, some Liberals were emboldened, even though Ignatieff's announcement was made before they actually met in caucus.
The government's goose is cooked.
Canadians don't want an election, said Prime Minister Harper in response, not mentioning that he called a snap election last September, less than 3 years after the previous one.
But I think it's pretty clear that the focus of Canadians is the economy, not more political games.
An election is not a political game. An election is about fundamental choices.
Are you ready to paint the North red? I think you are. I think you are.
If the Liberals are firm about where they stand, things are not so clear elsewhere, because the Liberals need support to bring down the government, for instance, from the NDP. Today, NDP MP Thomas Mulcair said that if Prime Minister Harper is willing to work in the public interest, then we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis. But only if the Harper government adopts the NDP's plans for EI, pension and severance protection, and defending Canadians abroad.
But that's not a deal. That's called making Parliament work and getting results, and that's what our agenda is.
The Bloc Québécois wasn't available for comment today, so the focus now is on the Liberals and the new tack they are taking.
We have a completely different situation in Parliament. The tenor and tone is almost certainly going to be ratcheted up closer to that of an actual election campaign.
The House comes back September the 14th, and the Liberals say they'll introduce a non-confidence motion at their earliest opportunity. But the Conservatives could preempt them and introduce a confidence motion of their own, meaning an election could possibly be weeks away.
With all three opposition parties apparently determined to bring down the government, the Conservatives struck back. They warned that Canadians could lose out on a popular tax break if they went to the polls. Here again is the CBC's Leslie McKinnon.
It's been a busy summer at home supply stores.
Like I've put 2 new doors on my house, and I've upgraded my toilets.
New bathroom, and I guess quite a few different things.
And now they're hearing they may never get their tax credit because it was never passed in Parliament.
I thought it was already in place, but I gather it isn't. However, I hope they put it through.
When I read about it, I thought it was already in effect.
And who do the Conservatives say would be to blame if people don't get their tax credit? The Liberals, who've said they'll no longer vote with the government.
If a tax measure is defeated, that's a pretty serious blow to a tax change in this country, and that's a real concern for many Canadian homeowners.
Ridiculous, said Bob Rae. If the Liberals form the government, they'll simply reinstate the home rental credit in plenty of time for tax season.
Carry on painting, carry on renovating. Those tax credits will be fully recognized and by whoever the government is in 2010.
These are the kinds of maneuvers going on in these anxious late summer days of will there, won't there be an election?
I'm not making any backroom deals with the Prime Minister.
A few NDP MPs have hinted the NDP may take on the role of propping up the government. No, says the NDP leader, who spoke for the first time on this. It's all on the Prime Minister's shoulders.
The choice is yours, Mr. Harper. You can either choose to work with other political parties to try to make life better for Canadians, or you can choose to call an election.
No, said the Prime Minister as he toured Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's the opposition parties who want an election, jeopardizing the economic recovery.
People know there's, the deal between the NDP, the Bloc, and the Liberals. People didn't like that. I don't think we want to go there.
So, no appeasement, no truce, not today. But keep in mind, the Bloc, the NDP, and the Conservatives have not completely ruled out working together in some fashion.
And that's exactly what happened. By the time Parliament resumed in mid-September, NDP leader Jack Layton had softened his position. And as the CBC's Terry Malewski reports, was hinting that he might be prepared to support the government.
The announcement today appears to be a step in the right direction.
The NDP leader doesn't always attract so many cameras, but he did today because the government confirmed it will improve unemployment benefits, just as the NDP wanted. That could buy Layton's support.
Our preference remains fighting for the unemployed rather than fighting for a second election.
Layton said he wants more from the Tories and he is not giving them a blank cheque. But if the NDP does prop the government up, the Liberals can still try to vote it down, but they can't win. And that has Michael Ignatieff asking, well, now who's the one jumping into bed with the NDP?
I find it curious that after weeks of berating the idea of a coalition, the Prime Minister seems to be hard at work forming one himself, and with people that he referred to until this morning as socialists.
The leader of the opposition is flailing around trying to invent reasons why Canadians should have another election in less than a year, 4 elections in 5 years.
Harper didn't mention the NDP or socialists. Instead, he said the House should focus on the economy, not politics.
All the parties in Parliament should be focused on those measures and on the economy, and the leader of the opposition should focus on our country's best interests.
How can Canadians trust a government with this record? The problem of instability, Mr. Prime Minister, is you.
Harper replied that Ignatieff has no economic plan, but when Layton got his turn, he aimed at both Ignatieff and Harper.
Maybe he's got used to this carte blanche that he's had with 79 votes in a row from the official opposition without even getting anything in return.
Still, it seems that Harper's best hope for avoiding a campaign is the same Jack Layton who only 8 months ago damned the Liberals for supporting the government and swore that he would not.
We will vote no confidence in this government.
But that was then. Now the pollsters say the NDP may not want an election. It doesn't have a lot of candidates nominated, and a vote could cost them the bargaining power they have now.
So they did extremely well in the last election. Why would they be looking for another election now? They're also tracking several percentage points below what they got in the last election.
And shortly after that, a lot of Ignatieff's Liberals were also having second thoughts about an election. When a new poll showed Liberal support plummeting, the poll showed the Conservatives with 39.7% support, the Liberals trailing badly with only 25.7%. And this probably didn't help lift Liberal spirits either. Prime Minister Harper making a few new friends at an arts gala in Ottawa. So shortly afterwards, Ignatieff announced that he would not oppose every Conservative bill, just the ones he thought were bad for Canada, and was rewarded for his patience with a Conservative scandal. A number of Conservative MPs were shown to be claiming personal credit for a government economic stimulus program by issuing big checks with their party logo and/or their names on them, which outraged the opposition.
Because it's not your money, it's not your party's money, it's the Government of Canada's money.
And as the CBC's Terry Malevsky reported, led to some angry words in the Commons.
What's next, Mr. Speaker? Putting the Conservative logo on Canada's Olympic uniforms? Oh no, they've already done that.
Well, not quite. Actually, the logo on the uniforms, seen on the left here, is not the same as the Tory logo. It's just similar. But never mind. The now familiar spectacle of Tory MPs across the land slapping their own names and logos on government cheques is hurting the Conservatives.
More than 50 Conservative MPs have handed out $600 million in checks with their own signatures on it.
Members of Parliament should not apologise for their achievements, Mr. Speaker.
With the Prime Minister not in the House, it fell to John Baird to handle some troubling new questions, like how come a Quebec Conservative Senator, Leo Housakos, was on the board of a company that got infrastructure money. Baird said no problem.
Neither the minister nor his office had any involvement with this contract.
But then there's the question about the splashy rollout for the Prime Minister's economic update last June. The opposition says it would have cost nothing to do it in Parliament instead of jetting off to Cambridge, Ontario for a costly event with the party faithful.
1 hour of a Conservative Party infomercial cost Canadian taxpayers more than $100,000.
We don't apologize, Mr. Speaker, for having our Prime Minister speak to Canadians in every corner of this country.
But for the Liberals sagging in the polls, the whole issue has been a godsend. No surprise that they won't let it go.
The partisan abuse which is going on around Canada is now completely out of control, in that it represents the single largest propaganda effort in Canadian federal political history.
But it's not just the Liberals who are up in arms. Jerry Nichols is certainly no Liberal. He's an old comrade of Stephen Harper.
Well, I can tell you, Terry, when I worked with Stephen Harper at the National Citizens Coalition, this kind of stuff used to drive him crazy when governments would use public money for partisan purposes.
And the government clearly knows there is a problem. Last week, the website for its Economic Action Plan had an obviously partisan link to the famous video of Stephen Harper singing at the piano. But today, poof, that link has gone, and it's now the Liberals who are getting a little help from their friends, who are passing out these buttons saying, "Welcome to the Czech Republic."
So as October drew to a close, the situation remained uncertain, with the Liberals seemingly content to attack the government, the NDP seemingly prepared to support the Conservatives, some Conservatives probably hoping for an election to take advantage of their lead in the polls, and most observers predicting an election sooner rather than later. And that's News and Review. Don't forget to check out our website at newsandreview.cbclearning.ca. I'm Carla Robinson. Thanks for watching.
I could hear the wheezing in my chest that I thought, if I go to sleep tonight, I might not wake up.
Within 24 hours of coming into a hospital, they require support in the intensive care units on mechanical ventilators.
On News and Review today, keeping up with the swine flu. Hello, I'm Carla Robinson. It first arrived in Canada last spring. It has since spread around the world. Now a second wave of the swine or H1N1 flu is hitting Canada. So what have we learned about this new virus and how can we best protect ourselves? The good news is that it's still the same virus that hit us last time. It hasn't mutated into a more deadly version like the Spanish flu of 1918 that is believed to have killed more than 50 million people all over the world. So most people who get this new flu suffer only mild symptoms and quickly recover. The bad news is that it can spread like wildfire, and for some groups like young people, pregnant women, and Aboriginals, it can be particularly deadly. But even if you do recover, the swine flu can be pretty unpleasant. Here's the CBC's Kelly Crow with some survivor stories.
I could hear the wheezing in my chest that I thought, if I go to sleep tonight, I might not wake up.
It was the sickest I'd ever felt from anything really, from the flu or food poisoning or whatever else.
I couldn't move my legs, my arms, my whole body, my back, everywhere, really from head to toe. It felt like vice grips. My name is Anouk Benzakar, and I had the swine flu, and I've never been so sick in my whole life.
My name is Ryan Windsor. I went on vacation to Cancun this spring and became the first person in BC with swine flu.
A souvenir from his trip to Mexico, Ryan thinks the virus latched onto him in a bar.
I'm Patricia Bell. I was the first confirmed case of H1N1 in Eastern Nunavut.
Brought home after a flight from Ottawa, Patricia never met the person who passed it on. So how does the virus get into the human body anyway? We asked Dr. Susie Hoda of the University Health Network in Toronto to explain.
It's usually spread by droplets. So if a droplet happens to land onto near the nose or the mouth or the eye area, then it can attach to some of the cells that line the nose and the throat area. And once it's in the cells, it replicates or it reproduces and creates more copies of itself.
This is how the virus travels, hanging in the air after a cough or a sneeze, or hitching a ride on the human hand. The flu virus can survive on a phone or other surfaces for up to 8 hours. You may not know you have it. It will take anywhere from 1 to 7 days before you get symptoms. And at first, those symptoms can be so mild